Hi, friends. Thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach podcast. Today, my guest is Puja Suri. Puja is a Canadian certified counselor and mind-body coach with a master's in counseling psychology. She's been an advocate for persons with disabilities for 19 years and worked in the mental health field for 13 years. She's also a children's author of the book Mamta's Lovely Mustache, which is about inclusion and self-love. She believes in being trauma-informed and person-centered. In 2016, she acquired a concussion, which sparked the creation of Hope and Harmony. Feeling heard, believed, and belonged were important pieces to her recovery. She understands the plethora of emotions and the tumultuous nature of recovery and hopes to be a companion along the journey and guide others in the right direction with both her professional and personal experience. She strongly believes that every voice matters and that you are the expert of your story. So I'm so excited to get to know you and to hear more about your story. Thank you for being here, Puja, and let's hear more. Tell us a little bit more about you. Where are you from? What got you interested in being an advocate for people with disabilities? And how did you get into being a mental health therapist and yoga instructor? I want to hear all the things.
Okay. Thank you so much, first of all, Bethany, for having me on this podcast. It's one that I absolutely love listening to. And yeah, I just feel so honored that you have me on today. So thank you so much. And for giving other people this platform to speak and spread awareness of brain injury, concussion, and education. So important. So a little bit about me. I think a lot of my career being part of this field really started when I was 15 and started volunteering in the community. And that's when I started seeing like the hardships within my community. And it brought it was disheartening, but also insight into how I could help and how I could use even my own privileges to help people who are in the shadows become visible. And that kind of morphed into this career in mental health and as an advocate for persons with disabilities, which became such a huge part of my life, not a career, it was my life. And then it's assisted my entire recovery. And it's funny how, that I would have never known that would be something that would eventually heal me, and the voices of people, their stories would continue to lift me and motivate me and bring me hope. And so I spent a lot of time, helping people through self-advocacy, coping with their own grief and symbolic losses, having presentations in the community so that organizations could accommodate for people with disabilities so they could be present and participate in really advocating for inclusion and providing rehabilitation counseling and things like that. And that was I really enjoyed that. And I really enjoyed the exchange of love that happened every day for me and for the people that I was working with. And for yoga is like a part of my culture and religion. So it's something that was always embedded in my childhood. And without it, especially like the ancient philosophy of yoga. And that's what I really tethered to throughout my injury. It's also what I incorporate into my counseling practice and professional life. And I used a lot of philosophy and wisdom to ground me and pull me out of really tough times, especially when I couldn't do yoga postures and things like that. Then I really turned to breathing or the pranayama or the meditations. And so I did a lot of that really I stayed close to during my recovery. So I like to use that to help people as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. I have a bunch of questions for you just from hearing that. Tell me where in Canada are you?
I'm in Calgary, Alberta.
Okay. And is that where you grew up?
No, we kind of grew up all over Canada. So I've lived in BC and Edmonton and Medicine Hat and born in Fort McMurray. So kind of, yeah.
I love it. I feel like I've gotten a lot of connections with Canadians through doing this. I like you guys. So tell me about you said you just were volunteering at age 15, you started volunteering in your community. What kind of volunteering was it? What community are you speaking of specifically?
So, going to hospitals and bringing certain gifts to children, caroling in seniors facilities, and then, raising funds for, at like age 18 for my librarian's daughter who had cancer. And so I would raise funds for her daughter. And eventually it turned into like working with children and working with children with disabilities. Yeah. And so it kept evolving. Like right before my concussion, I wanted to be on the board of Autism Calgary. And so I got involved in that because I did a lot of behavioral support work with children with autism. So like within my career, I worked with people with an array of different illnesses and disabilities, people with degenerative and developmental brain conditions. And so I also then, along with my work, volunteered in those areas. But yeah, it definitely started off in just seeing sick children in the hospital and providing them with gifts and, fundraising for people who were sick in my community. Yeah.
I love that. What a beautiful big heart you have. I think that's so beautiful. And like when you see it makes you want to do something. Like, so I love that you got that exposure and that's kind of influenced you. And then I love what you said about how that turned around and was so helpful for you along your journey as well. It's really, really beautiful. And were you, as a mental health therapist specifically, did you get that training prior to your injury or was that after?
No, that was prior to my injury. Actually, the day of my injury, I was in an interview for a provisional psychology position to help people with concussions. And that was the exact same day I acquired a concussion. So when the director of psychology, when he notified me, I was like, I cannot take the position because I have a concussion. And he was like, no. And I remember just really being hesitant and dismissing my intuition that day because something didn't feel right. And I didn't want to go to that interview. And and I ended up with a concussion that day and I completely changed my life. But I learned a lot about, supporting people with concussions through my own journey. But yeah.
I believe that. Well, let's hear a little bit more about that. How long ago was this injury? What happened? What symptoms did you have?
So in August, it'll be 8 years. So I still have, right now, I'm just going through like the persistent concussion symptoms. I'm doing a lot better, so it's a really long journey to recount, the steps of it. But so it was my second interview for a position to help support people with concussions. And when I left that interview, shortly after I left, I ended up acquiring a concussion and I really didn't know. I was in such shock. I didn't know what was wrong with me. My head hurts. It was excruciating pain. And it wasn't the outside, it was coming from the inside. I just felt like heavy and swollen. My brain did. I was like an inferno inside my brain and pins and needles and my shoulders were raised in a protective stance. That's what stopped my head from, my neck from thrashing back and forth and really protected my brain, I think. And your body just knew what to do. It was the most beautiful thing that it spoke for me, in that moment. It protected me. I thought it was mind blowing, at the same time devastating. And I started seeing floaters. And the next day is when the full kind of presentation of the symptoms emerged and I couldn't walk to the bathroom. This bathroom is only a couple of steps from my bed. And I remember just sobbing because it was difficult for me to look through the blinds on my window. Depth perception wasn't there. Later, I learned that I had, visual vertigo. And the whole time, physicians are telling me, well, it's anxiety. But I'm listening, I've treated people with anxiety. I've helped them and none of them had difficulty walking up and down the stairs. Okay, I understand anxiety is a symptom or it's a byproduct of what happened to me. And there's some comorbidity there. But the fact is, obviously I had PTSD as well. But I could not read. I could not write. It would take probably 6 or 7 years, but by the time that would come back to me. I could dance again. But at the moment, like peeling an egg was difficult for me. It was exhausting for me to peel an egg. I needed complete assistance, home care. Bathing was difficult. Like I said, even walking for prolonged periods of time, up and down my stairs. My husband would become my primary caregiver. There's a lot of changes, all at once immediately. I saw a huge flash of light during when I acquired my concussion. And so I had a lot of visual light sensitivity issues, hearing hyperacusis and migraines, like severe nerve pain that was lasted years. And so I think though, it wasn't the litany of symptoms I had that was the most difficult part. For some reason, I felt like my faith with me and my mom, who's a concussion survivor, made it through 5 years of dealing with concussion symptoms. And she had 5 kids and she lives a good, strong life. And I always looked at her and knew like, okay, mom did this, I can do this. And she was always my pillar of strength. But what was really devastating was the treatment from healthcare professionals. The abuse I faced in the system was no different than what I saw, witnessed and reported that happened to my clients, the people that I supported. And I reported a lot of that abuse and I try to help change policy so that wouldn't happen to people. It shouldn't happen. And, I had a physiotherapist who held me down against my will. I was just in such disbelief that she was doing this. I couldn't get up. She held me down 3 times and then violently needled my neck. Told me it was tough love to reset my nervous system. And I thought in that moment, no, like that's completely the opposite of what my nervous system needs. Yeah, it's only going to exacerbate my symptoms. And, I've had physiotherapists tell me that it's my fault that pacing failed. And in my mind, I thought as a healthcare professional, I would never think that it was just on my client. Like this, we're working together. There's got to be some sort of collaboration. Like it's nobody's fault. I just want help to get better. And then denied vision therapy my entire recovery because hyperacusis. And this was like the only vision therapy available at the time. Like I think the system in my city was kind of archaic at the time. It was a little bit ill-informed in brain injury recovery. So I didn't receive the proper support. 6 years later, I would meet an OT who would believe me enough to give me support for my eyes. And now there's more vision therapy clinics that I want to get into to strengthen my eyes need some work coordinating, but so much better to the point where I have my ability to read again. And so that was the most devastating part was how can I walk into these facilities and have all this hope and that be completely crushed by helping professionals.
Yeah, that's distressing to hear. Very distressing to hear. Do you mind sharing with us what happened with what gave you the concussion?
So it's so hard to even say, right? But it was just a minor car accident. But my injury was compounded. And that's the thing that health professionals definitely missed. They missed the grief. They missed the trauma from PTSD. And they missed the fact of asking me, did you have previous injuries? Or even focusing on the fact that I had just had whiplash 5 months prior to my concussion. And a year before I got into another little fender bender and my head was hurting after that, but I wasn't ever diagnosed with a concussion. So when I look back at my history playing sports as a child and all of that stuff, I'm like, you probably hit your head 12 times, with basketballs and, smacking the ground, playing football with your boys and that type of thing. And I was never diagnosed with a concussion. I would always bounce back. But the last time when I think right before my concussion, I hit my head on a trampoline and I went to the emergency and I was like, my vision is blurry. I don't know. Do I have a concussion? And the ER doctor said, no, it's your neck. And so I knew that my neck played a huge role in my symptoms and treating my neck actually really reduced the blurry vision. It reduced a lot of my symptoms. So I had to go through a lot of rehab and still have to, but not like it was before. It would take a lot of time to strengthen my neck. And then eventually a lot of the symptoms just slowly subsided. I changed my environment, the people in it, that was all very important. And I found more support and that really, really started to help me. But and even all of this just sparked that advocate in me to keep going and give me kind of purpose in a way, despite how hard it was. But
Yeah. I imagine that this experience, all of these experiences have just helped you to be even more passionate and effective, and wanting to put yourself out there to help these other people dealing with similar things, which I think is awesome. And I think it's important. I appreciate you mentioning that it was a car accident, even if like, it's important for people to know that even if it's a quote unquote like minor accident, or like the severity of the hit to the head, or even the whiplash, like it doesn't even have to, you don't even have to have actually had a bonk on the head to get a concussion and for it to be devastating. I think a lot of times if people have that kind of experience, they want to downplay like, well, it wasn't that bad, and so why am I feeling this bad? Like it doesn't equate, doesn't make sense. And that's how it is sometimes. So I think it's important for people to hear and know that. And like you said, it could be an accumulation of hits throughout life that you didn't even realize were happening. And then, yeah, anyway, it's whatever you're experiencing it and it's real. So please don't question yourself, and please find the people who will believe you and offer that help. I think that's really important to put out there. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I'm so sorry to hear about all of the treatment from medical professionals that was less than helpful. And yeah, that's, I don't know, surprising to me and also distressing. So being aware that kind of stuff happens, and for people to advocate for themselves and to find help is also really important. I'm curious, you said that it sounds like those symptoms and everything were very significant and hit very fast. When you said you changed your environment and the people in it, like how far into it were you able to do that and find that change? Like what did that look like?
I think it was years. I think it was probably 3 years into it, because I was so weak. I was so vulnerable. I think my realization with concussion is that you don't just lose your functional abilities, daily life tasks. There's also a loss of like dignity and privacy. There's a loss of like self-esteem and worth. Like so much is just stripped from you. You go from living this life of not living with fears or worries, and then all of a sudden everything is broken down into chunks and restarting again and trying to explain this invisible disability to people who don't understand it, and knowing intuitively something's not right, yet everyone around you is like, you're fine, and it's like, no, I definitely am not fine. I can say now that I'm more fine than before, but no, and I think, yeah, changing my environment really meant even like physically changing it. So we removed furniture from our one of our rooms, our TV room, and I put a gym there so that every day I would see that, and I would get on that bike. That started to change things for me mentally, and I could focus on the psychological component of what was happening with me while I was waiting for treatment physically. And so I could slowly get on the bike and do some slow movement on the mat, things like that. So we did things like that. Anyone who wasn't supportive of my recovery, I learned loving detachment, which meant, I'm not cutting off these relationships, but for now I can postpone them, and I can send you love from afar. And, when I'm ready, I can return to these relationships. But it was exhausting, expending. And I recommend, people with concussions not to expend their energy on the wrong relationships, because you have to conserve your energy for your healing. And that's the most important thing. And when I pushed those other relationships aside, I was flooded with more empathetic and understanding friendships and just support on this online community. That was life-changing for me, the online community. Finally met my group of people. I was always compared to like people who could return to work after 48 hours and things like that. I couldn't. And so I was told by many professionals that you're an anomaly, but you have to stick to your intuition. And I knew I was not an anomaly. I was just being compared to the wrong group of people. And then I go online and I see so many people with PCS, and I learn so much that I have like almost like a backing now when going into appointments, because I'm like, actually, I'm learning this stuff. And actually, there's people that are, suffering just like me and have the same symptoms. It was so amazing. And it actually really supported my husband, because he could actually advocate for me and say, no, like there is something more than just anxiety here. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that is huge. That is so huge. And I man, okay. We could dive into all these things you just said. That was so good. I love that concept of loving detachment. That's something that I have felt strongly that I hear people talk about a lot is, this, they feel like the people pleaser in them feels like they have to push themselves more than they can, or they have to like do things for a relationship that because other people don't understand. And I feel strongly about how helping people see that, no, that's not like your recovery is key and is important and is okay to take priority. You don't have to like bend over backwards, especially when you can't bend at all for somebody who doesn't understand. And so that idea of loving detachment, and again, I think, all relationships, there's so much that's so complicated and nuanced, but to the degree that you can, being like, okay, I see that you don't understand. I love you. I can love you from afar for now. And the idea that it's not forever. I love that actually, like quite a lot. And the idea of not expending that energy on relationships that are not supportive of you in that moment. And again, that's not to say that we cut out everybody or that we like that everybody has to understand, because people are where they're at and that's okay. But the fact that you can approach that with love and with, kind of putting it on pause instead of just like it all or nothing kind of thing. I think that's really important. And again, I love the online community, like the fact that you can find, the internet allows us to find people who are our people and make those connections. Do you have any recommendations or suggestions for people who are looking for that kind of support and don't know where to find it? Like, where would you guide people to look, or what keywords should they be searching for? Or do you have specific organizations that you would like to recommend?
Is in regards to the online community?
Yeah.
The first, I think, pit stop for me in this journey was the concussion community. That really was eye-opening to me. Hearing Sylvie's story resonated with me. She was the first person that spoke like my language, and I could show that to my husband, and it was just both of us. We're like, wow, it's not just you. There's several others as well. The Vertigo Doctor. There, I can't remember all the handles, unfortunately, but yeah,
If you want to, if you want to send them over later, I can put them in the show notes of like things that have been helpful for you.
Emily there is a psychologist, vestibular psychologist, and she is great. And just reading about, learning more about vestibular conditions, because I have been misdiagnosed. And it's not just my story, but learning more about it just put me at the helm of my experience. So that was it's just so refreshing that type of education exists out there. But yeah, there's a lot of different concussion groups too that I can also recommend. And I just can't remember all the handles, but I believe one is called the Concussion Full Dizziness. Samantha runs that group. I probably just butchered her handle.
Oh, Concussion Fully Dizzy, I think. Is that?
Yes. Concussed Fully. Her group is wonderful.
That's it.
Yeah. So her group is wonderful. And I've attended one of her groups, and I've been meaning to attend the other ones. But again, just hearing all these stories from people, and also they're not always like, in the acute stage of recovery, right? So a lot of us come with like variety of stages and where we're at. And sometimes those conversations are really empowering, and sometimes they allow you to process your own grief. So really beautiful. But yes, I'll give you a list, because I really admire those who come on there, and, even with your podcast, things like that, like super supportive and helpful for people like me.
I love that. Thank you for, I would love that list. And you're on that list as well. I know you're putting out goodness and helping people as well. So we'll definitely swing back and hear how people can find you too. Because I think all of this, the more we can put out there, the more help we can offer, the better, because there's so much need. So thank you. I'll look forward to that list, and we'll definitely put it in the show notes. So how much did you know about concussions prior to having your own experience with concussion?
So that's the funny thing, because that came up in my interview where they were like, what do you know? And I'm like, I did not know a lot about concussion, but I knew a lot about other types of brain injuries, because I worked in that kind of rehabilitation setting, people, and helping them kind of build upon what they had left, so they could have, somewhat of a good quality of life. What I did know was how hard the system is to navigate. That wasn't surprising to me. Like I said, that was the most scariest I remember days after my concussion, I was like, here we go. You're going to be a number in the system. It's going to be really tough I had to have this conversation with myself, like, how tough it is to navigate this system. And you may experience ableism. There's discrimination here, and fighting for your right, your voice to be heard is going to be exhausting and also prolong like your recovery, which is a really unnecessary part. And that's the part that I understood, but I had no idea that to take concussion so seriously, because when I heard the word brain injury associated with concussion, I was like, oh, because when you hear concussion, you don't really take it seriously, and just feel like you can just bounce back. And that was the old mentality of concussion. Now it's changed so much. And yeah, it should definitely be taken seriously. And listening to your body is essential, not fearing the symptoms. I think sometimes there's a lot of fear around the symptoms, but it's really, pain is also protection. Pain is also motivation. It's also a way of your body saying, I'm healing. And, learning to ally with that, your body was a really important part of that for me. But no, I did not know much about it.
What about the experience of concussion was surprising to you? I guess you mentioned the challenge of navigating the system, but yeah, anything else that was surprising?
I would say, I always say people kind of dispersing like flies, like losing the social support and the loneliness. Wow, I had never experienced like that type of loneliness. The isolation, like when everyone was in lockdown during COVID, I still couldn't connect with people on Zoom. I couldn't use my phone. So I was like double isolated, and so I felt for people who were ill during that time. I felt for people who couldn't at all go to like parks to socialize. I couldn't do those things, outside noises triggered headaches, migraines, I was so vestibular. I couldn't even sit on the floor. I had such vestibular symptoms that was really difficult for me. So I felt this like horrible sense of loneliness that we now know is, detrimental to one's health. And so I think lack of social support was so hard for me. And it was a part of my grief to really learn forgiveness and acceptance. So I would use like analogies like concussion is like a home being demolished involuntarily, my house just being demolished. And then there were some people who would come and help you rebuild your foundation, and they would whistle while I work. Others would come begrudgingly. Some people didn't show up at all. And others would support you from afar by praying. And so I would learn to just accept, the help that I was receiving and be really thankful for that and really learn to forgive. But for me, that lack of social support was really, really, really tough. So
thank you for sharing that. I was actually just thinking about this earlier today or yesterday, something like that social piece. It is so hard, I think, for people to know how to support people who are going through something like this. And everybody's, needs are going to be a little bit different. And I think it's, even just in life in general, like relationships ebb and flow and come in and out of lives. And that's okay. But yeah, I think that I like what you said about like learning to accept and just be grateful for what people were capable of offering at that time, and to forgive when you felt like it wasn't what you would have hoped and expected from somebody. And I think this is a good time to ask about like, what do you wish you had seen more of, or how can people help? Because it seems so hard to know how sometimes. What do you wish was different?
I think like for natural supports, I think it's really important that there's this education piece around it. I think being informed not only helps you, but helps the person that you love. And I think it also provides a sense of belief. Getting involved in communities is really, really important. And that to me, I think also understanding that if you are a helper and if you are a primary caregiver, knowing that you can't do it all. I think it was the biggest mistake my husband and I made. And we learned this 3 years in that he is not responsible for it all. That's like extremely tough to put on someone. So I had to look at like, okay, we have to examine who are the helpers around us who can provide respite, who can take me out to like little things, like activities if I was able to, who's the doer, who can help with appointments, booking, taking me to appointments, like who likes to plan, who are the listeners, who could come and just like listen and be in the presence of my grief and my situation, who had that capacity in my life. And what role did my husband play in really having to also manage your own self-care was a huge component for caregivers. But I noticed the people who took time to learn were more supportive for me. Going to seminars and whatever they did just to learn about it was when I received the most support. But yeah, and I think it's also important, like, because there's grief on both ends, your family will grieve for you and they may not know it, but to take a piece of that person with you, like something symbolic with you, as if they're there, you're keeping that spirit alive, those relationships alive, and take pictures, because now I can see pictures. It took me a really long time. I had a struggle with visual stimulation. So now that I can see pictures and I can go back, I live kind of vicariously through that. And I wasn't there, but looking at them, I feel like I was there. I absolutely love the pictures because I missed a huge chunk of my nieces and nephews growing up. Now I can see their birthdays, and I can see certain things I couldn't be a part of. So all of that in the end is going to help somebody, and also help bring closure to such an ambiguous loss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I thank you for all of that. I think, it just, that's a theme that comes up as I talk to people. It does seem to be really significant it means so much to someone to have the people around them who love them and want to support them, just understand, like do their part, like do what they can to understand and be informed about it. And also to believe them when they talk about what they're experiencing. That's key. And I love that aspect that you brought in about like sitting down with your husband and being like, okay, how are we going to make sure that we both are getting the support that we need, and recognizing it's not all on him, who are the helpers, and play to their strengths. I think that's a cool perspective I hadn't considered before. It's just like, because we all come with our own talents and strengths, and like some people are doers, some people are listeners, some people have different abilities to help in different ways. And I think that's really beautiful to recognize that and reach out. And I guess I should ask this too. Did you reach out and say to these people like, hey, I would really appreciate support in this way? Or was it just like, if you had something to go to, you knew the people that you would ask to take you? Kind of like, how did that look?
Yeah, that's another job of somebody recovering, is finding balance, I realized. And so, yeah, I would just listen. I would listen to those who were in my circle. And sometimes, another beautiful thing and a part of grief is when someone's going through such a loss, it's not saying, let me know if you need anything, because you don't want to feel like a burden. You already feel like a burden. So you're less likely to ask what you need. It was so helpful for people to actually come to me and say, this is how I can help you. Do you need your dog walk today? Instead, that's really important, is for your loved ones to tell you, this is how I can help you. Do you have dinner today? People, and it's beautiful because my in-laws and my mom, like, will still do that. We'll say, do you have dinner today? Do you need dinner? I can bring dinner. Like, my friends would come over and say, I can do your dishes for you. Like, those types of things are so important versus, what do you need? Because I wasn't going to ask a lot of the time. I felt like awful. And, but I think that's important. But I also heard and I also listened to what was going on in their lives too, so that I wouldn't overwhelm them either. So there was, a lot of that balance happening.
So that's beautiful, and so hard to find balance. Balance is always a tricky thing. I think it's a flow, it's a back and forth thing, but that's, really good insights. Thank you for sharing those. And I've had people who are like, my aunts just recently have been like, okay, I'm getting near the end of a pregnancy here. And my aunt was like, we're bringing you dinner. What day of the week works best for you? And I was like, you don't have to do that. She's like, no, if you don't tell us a date, we're just going to bring it on a random day. And I was like, okay, I believe you. I'll tell you a day. And it was legitimately so helpful. So I'm very, very grateful for that kind of help. So see how
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I'm curious, and actually, as let's keep on this theme of support stuff. Sounds like you were married at the time of the concussion, and your husband has been a support the whole time. And how did that change, or is there anything else that you want to share about his journey, his perspective of this, or how he was supportive, or like what that whole thing looked like for you?
I think it definitely has evolved because the education piece is so important. I think moving away from just listening to practitioners to listening to people with lived experiences, including myself, really kickstarted this different level of support. Him and I really learned that support comes in so many different forms, whether it's, emotional or, you're providing. I was providing him with support too. I think that there's this misconception that it was just my husband helping me, but I learned that I was also helping him. I couldn't provide him with physical support the way he was providing me with that, but I could provide him with advice. I could provide him with guidance and decision-making in his life. And so we stuck together because that part of our relationship was still there, even though I physically was not there. I could be there in an emotional way for him when he needed it. And for him, he could be there for me in a physical way. We ended up after 3 years realizing like cooking and cleaning was getting really hard because he's working really hard. He's working full time. So we ended up getting home care support. And I slowly have been weaning off home care support. And they have been so helpful. Like so helpful. Like I found the best agency in my city. Every single home care support worker who's come through has become family or a friend. Like we still connect. They see my progress that I've made, and even them knowing that I've used my phone, I can use my phone now independently. They will write me and say, "Oh my gosh, like I'm so proud of you. You're using your phone." So we had to lean on that. So my husband and I also created like a traffic light system where I would ask him, like, are you approaching red light? Do we need to stop? Because he would read to me because I couldn't read. And that's taxing on somebody. So I would always ask him, where are you? Are you able to read? And he'd say, yeah, I'm green light. I can read right now. And so we would read till he got to yellow, and I would try not to push red, but he'd probably tell you that I pushed red. And I'm like, read a little more, please. Cause I was still trying to learn during that time, and keep up with like a lot of psychology material and things like that. And so anyways, but yeah, it really evolved over time where he was also really lost. Like he was asked to be a caregiver and he didn't sign up for it. Right. And so that's not the line of his work. That's the line of my work. Right. And so he's a businessman. And so I think we both had to really relearn. I being a patient, and he being a caregiver, it was really tricky to navigate, but we got the hang of it. We got balance and we got support through, wherever means we could. And home care really, really, really helped being here when he was traveling and things like that. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. What kind of, when you say home care support, is that like CNA, like home health nurses kind of thing, like coming in and helping you with the physical things, or what do you mean exactly?
Yeah. So I changed up his facility a little bit because he was like, we don't really support in this way that you need. Because my stuff was more like functional tasks. Like, could you cook for me? Could you read for me? Could you book an appointment for me? I can't use my phone. We started putting things in place that started to work, like Google Home became like my best friend. So that was what really got my life. I could start to communicate with people because I was really, really isolated until my husband would come home from work and, the seldom visitors that I did have. But then Google Home, I eventually could start listening to music again through that. But so home care would really be my ears and my eyes because my light sensitivity was so severe. Walking to the mailbox was difficult for me. So they would do that for me. And it's funny now, the home care facility has switched things up. So they're helping people with disabilities now, and they're doing that type of thing. So I couldn't write and more than like a word. And so that they would write for me. So they would sign documents because I couldn't read them. My vision was really blurry at the time. And so they were everything for me at the beginning. And yeah, and then it just started to dwindle and it started to become just like cooking and cleaning or something like that. But initially they would tell you it was literally everything.
Well, and that's so important. Mm-hmm. It's so important. And I don't know that things like that. I love that they were willing to change things up for you. That's huge. And I wish that everybody who was dealing with a concussion had something like that. Yeah, that's a big deal. That's awesome.
Yeah, the owner has this exactly. Like, if we're not accommodating for people with disabilities, how can they live? And because they accommodated for me, they gave me my sense of, life back. They gave me ability to breathe again. So
which allows you to heal and improve, which I think is so you're not stuck there because you were able to get the support that you needed to get to the point where you could make more progress. I think that's really awesome. You were able to get that and that it made such a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's huge. And I'm curious, was that something that, were you able to find something within the healthcare system or something that helped to pay for that? Or did you have to do that out of pocket?
No, that's the difficult thing is, we had to do that out of pocket. And yeah, there's a lot of guilt that goes along with that because, again, it's another burden to have to do that. But at the same time, it gave me my strength back. And so now I'm hoping that I eventually can contribute and support, the things that I need. But yes, definitely that's a tough decision to make. And luckily it's the least expensive company within my city. Yeah. And so that's the wonderful thing. And also some of the staff, sometimes just have asked to volunteer their time, to help me. And so I thought, just so touched by that. Such strong women. And yeah, they're the reason why I can have longer conversations with people, because initially I couldn't, but I would sit here and I would just talk to them as they were helping me. And then I would take breaks and go back. They were my only link to socialization, so at that time.
I wonder, that's, I don't know, it's like sparking thoughts in my mind. That seems like a really good volunteer. Like if people are looking for ways to volunteer, like if somebody had some kind of system set up, just help in little ways that you don't have to have any kind of specific training, like that you were coming in and helping read to you, or just having a conversation with you. Like that's so meaningful for you. It makes such a difference, and something that people are willing to volunteer their time for. Like we need to figure out ways to connect people for those kinds of things.
Like a companionship.
Yeah.
It was companionship. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that they're doing that, and that you had that as part of your journey. That's really beautiful. What other things, treatments, therapies did you try? I know you had it sounds like there were some less than positive experiences along the way. What things were helpful? What did you try that helped along the recovery?
So I tried acupuncture, which was just amazing for me. Trigger point injections. So that really helped with my neck. A lot of physiotherapy, still go to physiotherapy. Eventually an amazing occupational therapist who also suffered from, visual disturbances and some things with her vision. And so she got it. And, she worked so hard to help me and gave me all these different reading material so that I could get my eyes back to tracking and reading. And she really followed me closely. Just absolutely love her. And then cranial sacral therapy was also life-changing. I also did a lot of somatic processing, and then I ended up learning that. So that really changed the direction of the modality that I use as a therapist is more somatic based, like mind body and the connection. So that really helped me process the trauma that was sitting in my body. I didn't realize for so long my shoulders were still raised in a protective, manner. Mm-hmm. And once I started releasing that, I also released my jaw. I also started breathing because I was still holding my breath from that moment. And none of that was, I was not consciously aware of that. And once I was, again, my brain was at ease and could finally go into healing versus survival. I was stuck in survival for so long. And the more I learned and educated myself, I adopted these methods and I use them to this day. I really want to help people with the same types of techniques and strategies. So,
I love that. Yeah. I love that you were able to find those things that were helpful for you and that you're now incorporating into your own practice as well. And interested to hear with the somatic processing, I imagine, that's like a physical body kind of thing as well as yoga. Is there much overlap between the two, or are they pretty separate modalities?
Yoga is considered like a somatic form of therapy yoga is so much more deeper. It's very spiritual. It's very mind-based. Like the body is used in order to strengthen the mind. And that's kind of like that ancient traditional practice of yoga. So I'm more of a traditional yoga educator teacher. And for me, it's really elevating a sense of consciousness when it comes to yoga and in the traditional sense of it. And also there's a part of devotion to, when we're chanting our mantras and things like that, that's like part that's kind of connected to like the religion of the origin of yoga, like Hinduism, things like that. So because couldn't do a lot of movement, the asana wasn't part of yoga that I could do. And so until recently, I now can, and I've now have embarked on training through Love Your Brain Yoga. It's something I really recommend because they have amazing, they really do honor the essence of yoga too, traditionally as well, but they do a lot of modifications. So, and that would have helped me a lot initially. And so they are different. So that's the huge difference, is that spiritual component of yoga that's not always taught in the West. And that's what I lean on. Whereas, doing other somatic practices, and there's many different kinds of practices, are more, attuning to and tracking those cues of your body and recognizing the trauma that is trapped within your body and releasing that through different types of techniques. But there's so much more to it as well. You're learning how to reorient yourself to your environment, so that you're remembering your trauma, but you're not reliving your trauma. And little things like pendulation, where you're going from the pain that you're experiencing, but also internal resources within yourself, and really integrating new information into your system and, moving you through, and not really looking at like fixing, but feeling, things like that. So it's like, it's a little bit different, I would say, but there are still like relaxation and meditation techniques that are used. So that's kind of like, I would say, the overlap. Yeah.
And you do both in your practice.
I do. I use a lot of mindfulness, and I do that. And yeah, somatic practices, a lot of them are very mindful. You are paying attention, and you're working with your nervous system. Some of the theory is attached to polyvagal theory. So you're learning, how to work with your window of tolerance, so when you're like, your nervous system is like spilling over, and how to bring it back to a place from dysregulation to more like feeling more regulated, and when to incorporate breathing exercises, which ones to use, things like that are used. And so that's another overlap as well. The breathing and the breathwork practices and things like that. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for sharing all of that. I think there's so much to learn, so many cool things and ways to improve. And that's awesome. And I appreciate you sharing the things that were helpful for you. I like to have people say what worked for them, just so that it's out there and people can look into it and see if it feels right for them. So the craniosacral therapy, the PT, the OT, the somatic processing, the yoga, all of that. So good. And I'm glad that it sounds like you didn't give up on physiotherapy, even though you had some negative experiences with it. So
no,
there's still good things out there. So
I believe that. Yeah, I believe you gotta, keep looking. If it doesn't feel right, try. You'll find somebody. I found someone who was amazing. I found a couple of physiotherapists who were amazing. So after those incidences, I did know I couldn't give up, because that would mean giving up on myself. And I knew I wanted a better life. I believe that we're all deserving of that. So don't give up. Yes.
Yes. Amen. Thank you for that. I actually was talking to someone today in a consultation, and I don't know, I felt to tell her like, hey, I love that you're looking for answers, because that's how you're going to find them. Like, don't give up. You just keep looking. The right people, the right programs, the right things will come as we're open to them and searching for them and not giving up. So I love that was your experience as well. You had a post, I don't even know how long ago it was, about your niece and nephew and how how inspiring they were for you during this time of dealing with a concussion. And it was so sweet and so powerful. If you want to share, I would love for you to share with us, more about how they influenced your recovery, and what would you like to say about them?
Oh my gosh, they're such a huge piece of my heart and soul. I love the energy of children. And that's also how I changed my environment, really, is like really making sure I'm surrounding myself with, my nieces and nephews, and their innocent mindset, their imagination, their ability to not judge. They saw me. They saw me how I still saw myself despite my limitations. It's like they had laser vision and they could see right through that, right? Because they believe in anything is possible at a certain age. And they were just, surround myself by nature has that same kind of effect and appeal and calming, and they would, if they had questions for me, I would try to understand it in a way that they could grasp, and showing them that I am growing, because they did have questions about, are you going to get better? When are you going to get better? My one nephew actually was really funny. He's like, I'm going to pray for you. So tell me one thing that you want to get improved. And I gave him a list, and he goes, that's a lot for God to do. Like, that's a lot for God to do. And I'm like, I know, right? The concussion is a lot. It's not just one thing, but no, like, they would create like little tents around me. If I spent a lot of time lying down. I couldn't play with them. It was really hard for me to not be able to listen to them sing or dance or play music or look at their iPads. Like, I couldn't watch TV with them for a good 6 years. And now they can show me their dances that they do, and they can sing for me. And they are so proud of my recovery. I have like little books that they would create for me that would say, I miss you. And they would, continually motivate me to get better. And I, believe in the power of play. I don't postpone play anymore in my life. That was a huge thing that they've influenced. They always made me believe in the infinite possibilities that life has to offer. And I just love that anything that I had that was like used to help me function in life, like earplugs, they would go in and they would like tell me those are their like squishies. And they would always just, try to like make the situation light, and they weren't even putting effort to do that. That was just what their mentality was. And they always reminded me to see to see myself through it too, not to lose a sense of who I was, my playfulness and things like that. And yeah, and I'm just so happy that I can talk to them now after so many years. And to them, it's like no time has passed. But to me, I'm like, I missed everything. But not to them. I'm the person they love. Like, it hasn't changed, And yeah, it's so beautiful. And everything I did was really for them. And yeah, they're a huge piece in my recovery.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it is so beautiful and such a good point. Like, I mean, it's so hard because on the one hand, kids can be so overstimulating and you participate in all the things. You couldn't do all the things that you wanted to with them, but they were still so inspiring, and that light that they brought and the playfulness and and I always tell people to look to kids and dogs if they're wanting to learn how to do mindfulness, because they are in the moment. They're not worried about the past or the future at all. Like they really can be such an inspiration. And I love that you were able to see that and take what you did from that. I think that's really quite beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, they are in the moment. They are in the moment for sure.
So if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to yourself in the early days of your injury and recovery process?
I would tell myself that you always have a choice to leave uncomfortable situations. And the greatest credential of all are not like the accolades on a professional's wall, but your lived experience, and to lead with what you need. I think that is something that I take with me all the time now. And I would just always say, like, even lead with your own voice. You should never let anyone diminish that because they have a title. You're the expert of your experience.
That is such an important message. And I think something that it's almost like, I don't think we're like trained not to believe that, but the way that the system is set up, it just, other people are the experts of your body. And that's not necessarily true. So I think that's a really important point. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. how are you doing today? What are you still dealing with? What keeps you going?
So today I still have residual symptoms. I still struggle to use a computer, watch TV. Nothing is seamless. I still have to plan and pace. I still have light sensitivity. Like I'm wearing my sunglasses right now. Can't look at my phone for prolonged periods of time. I still need to take breaks. And so I'm waiting for that day, and I know it'll come where I don't have to put a conscious thought at all into what I'm doing. I can just do it, so there are still some things with light sensitivity. My eyes still need help to coordinate sometimes. There are times where if I do too much or I push too hard, I do experience like dizziness, and some of my vestibular symptoms come back. And so I know that there's certain things that are going to be constant when it comes to rehabilitation for me. And, what really keeps me going, I would say, is knowing that I can gradually and casually return to work. Starting Hope and Harmony counseling for me, talking to people with concussions. I really want to help women with concussions and family members and caregivers, and just hearing their stories and having my own personal experience as well to help them is such a great purpose in my life. And through Hope and Harmony, I have an outreach program where I provide wellness classes to children and adults, and we raise awareness and funds for nonprofits within my city. And I missed that. And because of that that outreach part of my company, I was able to get back to community. I brought community to my home first because I could not track large crowds of people. I couldn't look at them. I couldn't hear. It was so hard for me. So I started to bring people into my house and do like yoga events and things like that slowly with the support of my husband. And then eventually the group got bigger and bigger, and I can now visually track people. Now I can go out into the community. So I had to create these like simulated environments, and it kept me going, and I really missed my community so much. And so I just thought, you know what, Puja, you're going to bring it to yourself. You're going to bring community here, and then you're going to slowly make your way back. And so I try to do some community work once a month, and hopefully that will increase over time. But that's what's really keeping me going. It's been a huge blessing, counting on my blessings and just counting on them, and counting my blessings have been so important for me.
I love that. It's so beautiful to see how, like you said, the things that you started out doing have influenced how you manage your recovery, and then and then it's like inspiring. And I imagine all of this experience has influenced how you're moving forward with it, and the things that you're passionate about working with and doing. I love that you're getting back into the community things and seeing the progress along the way. That's really awesome. I love what you're doing. Love that story. So I know that you have a passion for trauma-informed care, and I would love to hear your experience with it, why you're passionate about it, what message you want to get out there into the world about that trauma-informed piece of recovery and care.
Yeah. So when it comes to trauma, brain injury is a traumatic experience. We know that people with TBIs are, at risk of developing PTSD. There's a lot of overlap there as well. And so it's a very fragile experience. And I think why I'm so passionate about trauma-informed care is that we as professionals do not re-traumatize or victimize that individual, that they're coming in, and it's not that they don't, you may not feel safe in your own skin, and let alone the environment. And so setting someone up for success and recovery is recognizing what trauma is if they are experiencing that, and what you can do to support someone. And so trauma-informed care is really looking at the person as a whole, and their past, their present, what they're really experiencing. Because when you look at trauma, it's being affected by an event that overwhelmed your ability to cope. And that affects your nervous system. It affects your, again, sense of safety, causes distress and helplessness. And so when you look at trauma-informed practices, it's now recognizing trauma-informed care and kneading it into policies and procedures so that you can provide the best patient treatment and care going forward. And I wish there was more of this, because I think that really prolonged my distress that I was feeling. It amplified the PTSD that I was experiencing. And I think it was such an unnecessary component, the mistreatment that I received. And I'm not the only one who receives that behind closed doors. So really shedding light on that. And I think with trauma-informed practices, it's not just for the patient, though. It's also for your employees. So at an organizational level, really helping inform staff that they could also be experiencing vicarious trauma, like secondary trauma, right? Helping people, knowing when they're triggered, how do they attune to themselves? That's really important piece of trauma-informed care, so that, your wounds are not spilling over onto that participant in that situation, or that your triggers, know how to handle them, whether you're grounding your feet, whether as a professional, you're looking around the room, you're taking deep breaths, you're focusing on spacing out your schedule so that you get necessary breaks, because we know that burnout is on like all-time high right now. And so the responsibility of the organization is to support patient and employee. And so we can do this by adhering to like the 4 R's of trauma-informed care, which is realization, like the impact of trauma. So having sessions where they can do this professional development and learn more about trauma and the impact of trauma, recognizing the signs of trauma within oneself and also in that client that you're serving. And that can also happen by building a rapport, gathering some history. Had a lot of the therapists I saw known that I was going through something, maybe they would have shown a little bit more compassion rather than let me just treat you and then send you out the door kind of thing. Maybe there would have been more of a conversation, a relationship built, and taking time to do that is important. And I think responding is another R here, where we're, again, integrating trauma-informed awareness into practices. So there is some accountability. And then resisting re-victimization and re-traumatization is another piece there. But I also love like these C's that I kind of came up with, and they're part of this whole trauma-informed conversation and part of the R's. But choice is really important, because again, you're the expert of your care, and it's important that the practitioner is giving you choice, and that there's something called power over and power with. Power with is that you're collaborating together. Power over is, professionals taking on that authority to make decisions for you. But we want to focus on power with, that we're working together as a team here, that there's also, co-regulation happening, so that if your client is, not doing well, that you can help bring them back based on their values, and taking the time to understand that by breathing with them, whatever techniques you have. My doctor used to take me to a happy place while she was injecting my neck, and I loved it. Then she knew that I love meditating and things like that. So she took that opportunity to do that for me. And that's because she got to know me. Another one is consistency. And if change happens, that you're telling your client that change is going to happen, versus just throwing that on them and springing that on them. Communication, using the client's language, talking directly to the client versus their care staff is so important. I mean, there's so many times people would talk to my husband about me while I was there, and I thought, wow, this is only perpetuating my sense of invisibility. And so these things are really important to implement. And when we're communicating from a strength-based approach as well. We're looking at not only what's going wrong, but what is going well. And I think those are really important pieces. If we can go forward and be more trauma informed. And I think that really comes down to training and also understanding oneself.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Okay. I want to make sure I got all of the R's. So there was realization and responding, and was it resist? What were the other 2?
So first realization. So realize, recognize, respond, resist re-victimization.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then, I love all of those. I think that's so important, and good for the care providers out there to be aware of and working towards. I think that you're right. It would make a very big difference if people were approaching things from this perspective. The more that I've been learning about trauma-informed care myself, I feel like it's so important. And it's I can see people being like, okay, yeah, trauma, like it's this buzzword, whatever, but it actually, like, there's people go through challenges, and we want to make sure that as we are helping them, that we're doing it in a way that is legitimately helpful, because the trauma can prevent things from that would otherwise be helpful from being helpful if you're not approaching it in the right way. So I think, yeah, no, this is really, really important. Thank you for sharing those things.
Yeah, it was kind of a speedy version, but I would really encourage people to get training. There's lots of different resources online to learn about it. And if anything, it also strengthens your ability as a practitioner in the field of helping people, really knowing when you are hitting that, you're overloaded, in recognizing those signs and cues, being able to track your own body, but as well tracking your patient. I now have practitioners in my life who do understand that, they do understand who I am, and they don't cross the boundaries, and I feel so safe and comfortable that my nervous system is at a good place when I'm with them, rather than leaving, re-victimized and already riled up, like that I cannot come down. And that's not what the brain needs in order to heal. Creating safe environments is also really important, right? When they create a welcoming environment for me, when their blinds are down, when their lights are dimmed, when they ask me, what do I need to feel comfortable, is the best thing in the world. They're paying attention to my needs so that we have a good session together. The environment is also key in that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so important. Such a good point. Thank you so much for bringing all of that up. I appreciate it. And I think it is important to get that out there. So thank you so much. I would love to hear, is there anything else that you want to make sure that people know about concussions or your experience thus far, how you maintained hope, all of those kinds of things?
So I've maintained hope through, like I said, the community of people online. I can't thank them more. They gave me the confidence to continue to pursue life, just hearing their stories, knowing that I'm not alone. It's just amazing. People from all over the world, like, it's incredible. And I just find, like, finally I'm not seen as, like, crazy, that this is real. And this whole time, like, it's just confirmation and validation. I think another thing that, since I'm more confident now, I feel more empowered when I go into appointments. I learned this acronym. I tend to lead with my body and my voice now. And so there's this acronym called BRAINS, and I want to share it with you. But so B is like, before I get into it, before I always felt forced to take on a treatment because I was afraid that the practitioner would no longer see me, because that's what happened. And so I would always take whatever medication was given to me. I just felt so pressured and rushed, and treatment should never be rushed. Growth and healing are the same in the sense that that takes time. And so now I have this acronym in my head before I just jump to treatments and just, push myself and my own desires and needs aside. So it's called BRAINS. And B is really looking at what are the benefits of this treatment. R is what are the risks. A is, are there any alternatives? I is listening to your own instincts. And N is, what happens if you do nothing? And S is giving yourself that time and space to make these decisions. And that, for me, just restores, like, my sense of hope and reclaims my space in my recovery. And also, this is another way to make informed decisions. And once you come through trauma and you do lose your sense of dignity and your autonomy, this is a way to say, I choose to, and you give yourself that power back. And so this has all been pieces of, like, my sense of hope, Yeah.
I love that acronym. I think that is, like, so valuable for everybody, really. But I can see that it would be especially helpful for someone who, like you, has gone through an experience where you feel so, like, torn down and not yourself and not able to advocate for yourself, and to be able to make those, like, kind of break it down and take that time and space to weigh out those options and make a decision that you feel aligns with you. I think that's huge. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, and the beauty of that community as well, and how much that has helped with the hope. I love all of that. Thank you so much. So how can people find out more from you, hear more from you, work with you? I love what you're doing. I think it's wonderful. Let's get your name and information out there.
So I share more of my like lived experience on, I call it spoken therapy. That's I don't even know what my handle is either. Is it _ spoken?
There's underscores in there. Something at spoken therapy, spoken _ therapy. I don't know. We'll
spoken _ therapy. I'll have to give that to you after, but that's where I kind of put my lived experience. When I couldn't write, I did a lot of, I leaned on what worked for me as a child. And I believe in doing that. There's a lot of strength in the things and purpose and the things we did as children. And so that was spoken word and poetry. And so I really put like my experience of my concussion through poetry on there. And that was another kind of sense of hope and purpose for me. And so that's why I said spoken therapy, because words became very therapeutic for me. My husband would help me like put that Instagram together until I was able to do it by myself. And so that's why that's the handle of that, but I can't remember it. And that's more of like my own personal journey. And then I have, the other one is I just started, getting back into counseling, and it's, Hope and Harmony Counseling. That's the handle for that. That one I'm pretty sure I know. It's Hope and Harmony Counseling. And there I'm slowly starting to build that community up. But my focus is, again, to help women and family members going through concussion. And as well through there, I provide, mindfulness services to children and adults. And we do workshops and things like that. I also do private sessions, but I call it Hope and Harmony because I feel like you should, hope is what really kept me going. And sometimes it can like flicker in and out. And but hanging on to that, not letting anyone rip that from me, allowed me to find kind of harmony in my recovery. And I hope to help people with that as well. And so they can find peace in their own recoveries. So that's Hope and Harmony Counseling.
Awesome. And those are both on Instagram. Are there other platforms that you're on?
I am. So I have one for the outreach part of Hope and Harmony. It's called Seva Girl. Seva is a term that means like giving in service. And so that's where I do a lot of the yoga and mindfulness events within my city. I don't remember the handles of Spoken Therapy or Seva Girl, but I can give those to you afterwards. Yeah. It's definitely Hope and Harmony Counseling that I remember. It's because that doesn't have the underscores. I don't know the placement of the underscores.
No worries.
That's the problem.
I'm curious about are you able to work with people from anywhere, or does it need to be within Canada or within your city? Like, what are the constraints or not there?
So right now it's within Canada. I know as a coach, because I am a mind body coach as well. So more of that like somatic work that I know I can work with people in, different parts of the world, but I think there's more logistics to that I haven't really worked through. So for now, I do just work with people within Canada.
Okay. Good to know. But anybody, anywhere can definitely access the beautiful information that you put out there. So people check out her Instagram, and we'll put the links in the show notes so you can find her. But yes, Puja, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your perspective and your willingness to share all of this. I think you had some really, really valuable insights, and I hope that it will be really helpful for people. I think it will be. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation. I love your work too. So yeah, thank you again. It's a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.